Hello and welcome to the Herbal Knowledge Keepers. And I am Blue Star and this is Dakota Granny Woman. And this episode is about creative herbal gardening. And again, these episodes have all been based upon the theme of introducing you and inviting you to participate in the herbal database.org. And that's what you'll see Dakota demonstrating throughout this session. You can continue to get familiar with how you can go into thousands and thousands of entries and knowledge that's been recorded in the database. So we hope you enjoy this time with us. Please don't hesitate to ask questions anytime throughout, and then we'll answer them as you present them. So welcome.
Welcome.
And hello.
So anyway, what you're looking at is the herb gardening section of the database. And obviously there's a ton of stuff to go through here. And we're not going to go through all of this. We don't have time. I'm going to zero in on creativity, some creative ways to do things. And one of the creative things to do with medicinal plants is to restore and reclaim waste land that's been degraded and nothing will grow on it anymore. Medicinal plants can be used to get that land back into shape. So that's just something to look at. There's a great article here about the mismanagement of land and how phytoremediation with herbs is one way to restore it, and especially with herbs that can be marketed. It points out that in India, for example, 70% of the herbs are taken from the wild and it's destroying the land. Whereas if they were to take wasteland and grow these medicinal herbs on it, they could make a profit and restore the land. So that, I think, is one of the creative things.
Dakota, is that including all wastelands? Like, I know we have the marshes and like down in Florida.
Yeah, there's a section in the database called phytoremediation. And so here's a whole bunch of stuff. If you have contaminated soil or, just general soil remediation, removing radiation, all that sort of thing, you can come in here, and I add to that as more information comes up. I do that all the time anyway in the database. So now the soil, of course, we know gardening always starts with the soil. I am just going to touch on this because it's another huge topic. One of the things that I would really recommend people in the database read is this article, Better Than Organic. And it is really important for understanding that just adding compost and manure to the soil is not nearly enough, especially here in the Ozarks, because our soil is very deplete in minerals. So here in this section, in any creative endeavor, we are going to start with the soil. We're going to want to assess the soil. What kind do we have? And so this whole section covers that, how to build healthy soil. What if you have clay soil? By the way, if you have clay in your soil, you're lucky, because clay soil, obviously you don't want too much, but clay soil holds on to minerals. Soil requirements, pardon?
Ben offered in the chat room, he's saying that Asian dayflower is a great plant for that.
For remediation or for clay? Yes. Okay.
For remediation.
Okay. Thank you, Ben. So anyway, this section just covers different types of soil and what kinds of plants grow well in it, like if you have dry soil, for example, which many of us do, and it breaks it down further into plant garden herbs for hot, dry, sunny areas.
And also, Dakota, do you happen to know, and I see Ben's added, it used to help remove chemical and metal impurities from the soil. Now, there's been a lot of footage on where we've had nuclear disaster, I think mostly out in Japan, where a lot of growth has returned. Do you happen to know the kind of growth that will return after radiation has happened?
I have a whole other database on that that's not up, and I don't recall right away. But most of it'll come up, but it isn't necessarily healthy growth, and I
Uh-huh.
certainly wouldn't want to eat it. But there's a section in here on phytoremediation for soils that have been contaminated that way, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
uncommon, unfortunately. Now, another thing I'd like to point out is this section on pain-free gardening. I think it's creative to find ways to garden that don't hurt, where if because you can get a bad back, you can have all kinds of problems, especially as we get older. So this section, if you go, well, I can't garden because I really ache afterwards, check this section out. And it also includes ergonomic tools and different types of exercises and things like that. So this is one way to make sure your creativity doesn't get stifled because of pain. So we're going to go
Mm-hmm.
over here. Let's see now. I want to find, materials and design. And this is where some interesting different types of gardens and different types of materials are located. It's good to start off with a site analysis. If you're just starting a garden area, there's a lot on urban gardening. Some of you folks, I think most folks that are watching this are going to be like us, kind of out in the country. But if you are in the city, there's urban farming is really huge, and there's just tons of stuff you can do. Now, for those who are in Arkansas, native plants, we really like to encourage the use of native plants in our gardens. And this site, Native Gardening, has a PDF on it that is a list of native plants for Arkansas gardens, and it describes what kind of soil and what kind of conditions they like. So that's something I would recommend to our Arkansas friends. Pallet herb gardening. Ben, do you do pallet herb gardening?
Let's see. Planting and encouraging native plants has been a major focus in my gardening and herbal practices.
Oh, good.
But Ben shared that before you asked the question.
Oh, okay. There's a lot that can be done with pallets, and throughout the database there are other instructions and ideas about that. But
Ben did respond. He said he has in the past, but he doesn't have any pallets going this year.
okay,
Probably make some more eventually.
okay. And then raised beds, of course, we're familiar with raised bed gardening, and this section covers some issues and suggests some approaches to take with it, including the best soil, how to build raised beds, an herb garden makeover before and after, comparing raised beds to in-ground beds, how to do a hugelkultur raised bed, and some things to think about before you go this route. And just hear a few ideas about how to make some very simple raised beds.
The one that was a huge mound, it was
Yeah.
Laura that assisted me. It was brilliant. Like she dug into the earth about 1.5 feet and
Mm-hmm.
then laid logs
Yeah.
and built the mound up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the logs were help provide moisture when it would be incredibly hot or a strong
Right.
sun.
Yeah, I really like using the logs.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're lucky, they'll grow mushrooms for you too.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yes, my garden was my upright garden. That's how I did it.
Uh-huh. So this
Was with
video,
backward.
this
Mm-hmm.
video, this 30-minute herb garden, that's a good one
Mm-hmm.
just if you're in a hurry and you need to
Yeah.
quickly get something together. And here's a video on how to make a spiral herb garden. So this is all under
Yeah.
materials and design. So another part of creative gardening is figuring out how to make it sustainable. And that's what this section is all about. And that relates to
Mm-hmm.
permaculture, of course. Here are different approaches just to landscaping and comparing some numbers. Of course, a bunch of information here about sustainable. So we always want to go sustainable whenever we're creating something. Here is a rather lengthy presentation on sustainable gardening in a changing climate, which I think is really important. And then, of course, sustainable landscape design. I'm just going to show you some creative ideas that I think are really pretty of ways to grow herbs. And these are going to be, I'm going to put them together. I'm not sure if maybe a PDF, I don't know, but I'm going to upload all of these to Herbal Knowledge Keepers, the file section, so that y'all will have them. Just like making a Christmas wreath, this is a wreath, but it has moss and stuff and it's growing herbs. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, that is really cool.
Now you'll see a lot of designs about growing plants in plastic bottles, and they're really clever, and I really like the ideas, but I am concerned about the plastic leaching into the soil and into the plants. So I don't really recommend those. We can use glass bottles, and a lot of us have so many glass bottles we don't know what to do with them. And so here's an idea of, you can come up with some pretty attractive designs. So that's just one way that you could display it, and they're right there for the clipping. Now here's a spiral garden. Kind of gives you an idea of how it's built. Okay, now here is just another example of hanging. I like vertical gardening a lot. And there are so many different ways to do it that are attractive and can make use of those little spaces that aren't being used. And this one is pretty cool, the way that they made a ladder to just lean against a wall.
Yeah. Nice.
Just another example of what you could do with jars. You could sell
That is.
those. You know,
No
you could
kidding.
make those and take them somewhere and sell them and get rich. Okay. This is another treatment that I really like of, it's really pretty, sinking the pots down into the ground. This one's been around the web for a long time. We need to find wagons like that. And here's another type of a pallet planter. This one looks pretty easy. All you need is some chicken wire and some kind of a structure that's stable, and then you can just hang those pots on it. Indoors.
It's just kind of like finding places to hang those little pots.
Yeah, yeah. And this one, what they've done is really interesting. The herbs obviously are growing out from the bottom of the bottle. It's actually a hole in the side, but it looks like it's growing from the bottom. And it's so easy to hang those. I think those are glass. That's the way I put them up there. Here are just some more varieties. Now, I'm not sure about these. I think it's a great idea, you know, those shoe bags, but I tend to also wonder what they're made out of, if there's anything that would leach into the soil and plant that isn't really, that we don't want. But I think it's a great idea. Maybe somebody could make them out of some kind of fabric that is safe. And then there's the gutter garden. What's going to leach out of the metal of those, I don't know, but this one, a cup of tea.
That's cute.
Making use of an old ladder.
Nice.
That looks like it's made out of a special material.
Like a burlap.
Yep.
No, it's like old baskets, huh?
Yeah. And I like the way they added some design elements here with these beautiful old dishes and stones. This is a rosemary topiary. All this old junky stuff can be made to look really nice. making use of the side of a building. And here are 14 perennial herbs you can plant and enjoy year after year. Some lavenders will grow. Of course, lemon balm, lemon verbena grows here. In this area, we're zone 6B. The sages, there's so many sages. Winter savory is great. Spearmint. Another way to hang
Oh,
pots. What?
there were messages here from Suzanne, who's in the chat room. She said she's been planting her herbs in the forest in sunny spaces near dogwood and
Good.
pawpaw, near
Good.
fallen logs, and they seem to be thriving. And
Yay.
she also has, yeah, and she also has an old chicken coop that she's using for a vegetable. It prevents critters from robbing. So that's a cool idea.
Yeah. And Suzanne, there's a large section in the database on forest gardening. Yeah, forest gardening is really creative and it's so ancient. You know, that's how people gardened for so long.
Right.
That gives some heat
Well,
and light to these.
that's a fun idea.
And there's just a beautiful herb garden design. Even the blocks can be attractive. I've never really liked them, but and here's how pots can be stacked on top of each other to expand the growing area. I don't know how many more of these I have, but I'm going to go through them kind of quickly now. Are you keeping up with me there? Are you seeing all this? Or am I going too fast?
Yeah, they're changing. No, they're working good.
Okay.
That's good.
I love this one.
It looks like a cartoon.
And this is for the cat, obviously, catnip and grass. Just some more designs. I love the way they're doing the baskets. And this just some ideas on design. Another spiral garden. They sure made this thing sturdy by framing it that way. So if you have one that looks like it's not going to last much longer, you might do something like this. Now there are other ways to be thinking about the gardens, and I'm going to go to this section, Design Ideas and Inspiration. If you're interested in gardening for birds, then come to this section, and these are plants that the birds love. For example, the whole Lobelia genus they love. Scarlet sage, the salvias, the monardas, love in a mist. I should say that the database doesn't just have medicinal herbs or edible plants. So I think it's useful in terms of being able to identify things so that you understand that there's more than one kind of lobelia or two kinds. Impatiens they love. So this section, and I love this. These are all bird-friendly plants, and they even put their little birdhouse right there. Isn't that cute?
Yeah.
Okay. So for the birds, we want a garden for the creatures. They're in trouble. Oh, and amaranth. They like that. The aloe vera they'll like if it flowers, but around these parts we can't really expect that to happen. Let's see, let's go to butterflies. They need our help as well. So here are plants for the butterflies. And if you're going to plant a butterfly garden, one of the important things is to plant the host plants, which are going to be different from the nectar plants. The host plants are one thing, and then they go to another type of plant to feed. Some guidelines, plant selection, details about how to create a butterfly garden. And also in here are some information, butterfly behavior to watch in the garden. I guess they have all kinds of interesting behaviors if you're a butterfly watcher. You might want to create water features. And that's not just for beauty, but for the animals. Like even bumblebees need water. So there are different types of water features we can make and design ideas.
I know that when we were putting water out for the bee sanctuary in Hawaii, one of the things Allison did is she put those glass beads.
Uh-huh.
She'd fill the bowl because the bees sometimes can.
Good.
You give them like, a pile of glass beads and then have the water in and out of those so they can drink from
Excellent idea.
it.
What about designing a school garden? And you can take it one step further and design an ethnobotanical community garden. Okay, on forest gardens. And this is connected to permaculture. That permaculture is its own section, and it's also connected to botany. And this is part of the botany section on trees, the forest layers, and forest mushroom production. So, and this video is kind of long, but I highly recommend it. It's a whole movie on forest gardening, the movie, and information here about how to design it. There's a book that's been around for a long time. You can click there on cultivating an edible landscape. That's really forest gardening. And then this link is just for tree crops, and that's a PDF you can get. So I think forest gardening is very creative. Garden borders, growing a native garden, naturescaping.
Yeah, I love that.
One of the aims is to help folks understand that these native plants can be really beautiful. That's butterfly weed, pleurisy root. Here's another one. That's gay feather and gray-headed coneflower together. Those are native plants here in Arkansas. Now, you might want to create a moon garden. I'm going to click on that. These plants are not necessarily medicinal or anything like that. Some of them are some are entheogens that are rather toxic, but planting a garden for healthy pets.
What I've always done, and it's really successful, is you always make an animal garden. You make a deer garden. So wherever you put your garden, you always make a little small plot for them. And honestly, they really do respect your gardening if you make one for them. They'll go to their garden.
Oh.
And you don't have to tend to it the same way. You just but you set it up and you let them know, rabbits, deer, this is for you.
That's an excellent idea.
Yeah.
Here's stuff on rain gardens, and that is something you're going to want to do. You might even be thinking about that right now with all the rain that we've had, because you can control the flow of water on your land by recognizing where the flow of water tends to pool up. At that area where it tends to pool, you plant water-loving plants. And then, of course, we've got the rock gardens. And these plants love rock gardens. I really like, the difficulty is moving those rocks around.
Yeah.
Then we've got the scented garden. Some folks might really want that aspect of the garden. And these are different plans and instructions for how to make a fragrant mood garden and where to place different plants. Some of them are just a little too strong to have under your window. This is a book, The Aromatherapy Garden.
Suzanne had said for the deer, she plants one peach tree for them and one for
Oh,
herself.
good for
Is
you.
that sweet?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that.
And the bear loved peach trees too. Okay, so the Three Sisters Garden, of course. I think most of us are familiar with Three Sisters, but it is a creative, old-timey way of gardening, and I think it's great. Now, it's not an herb garden, but the way I think of herbs is pretty broad because we know that beans are medicinal, corn can be medicinal, you can use the stalk of the corn to make to brew into something quite a fine fermented beverage. So all of these plants that are edible are also medicinal. Squash, very medicinal. The vertical gardens. Oh, I'm a big fan of these. Are any of you doing vertical gardens?
Since you've brought this up, I'm being very inspired. My mind's already twirling on where I could put one.
Well, some of the photos I showed were different kinds of vertical gardens. But boy, if you've got a big wall that has nothing going on, putting
Mm-hmm.
a vertical garden on it is a really good idea. And even these cute little plaques to put up somewhere. And so there are some ready-made vertical planters, hydroponic vertical gardens. Oh, and then there's the windowsill hydroponic garden. So we have just a little bit of time left, and I think maybe we should ask you guys if you have any questions or suggestions, ideas of what you're doing that you want to let everybody know about.
Well, and always a reminder that you have an ongoing conversation happening in the Facebook group of Herbal Knowledge Keepers.
Yes.
So one can always visit there,
Yeah.
and maybe you'll think of a question after you see this video.
Yeah. And
So you can see at the bottom of our window, there's ask a question. You can actually put it there, or you can put it in the chat room since we can see that right now too.
mhm. Oh, you had a question about greenhouses? Who is that?
That's Suzanne.
She's saying that she has an Amish greenhouse and the plants grow tall but produce little fruit. And so what I think is the problem there is you don't have pollinators in the greenhouse. And you could hand pollinate or, you know, it depends. Some plants don't need pollinators. I don't know what kind of plants you, yeah, you
Yeah,
definitely open windows and doors more. You know, with Suzanne, uh, this looks like this looks like something that we could talk about more in person, or maybe on Herbal Knowledge Keepers. You could ask there, and we could get into it because
okay.
there's more details to this, I think, that are
Mm-hmm.
relevant.
Yeah.
But thank you for bringing that up. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be a good conversation.
Mhm.
Very good conversation.
Mhm. Okay, so I think we are about done. Thank you very much, you guys, for joining us, and I will see you on Herbal Knowledge Keepers, and
Right.
happy gardening.
Yeah, happy gardening and have a blessed weekend. We have Easter weekend coming,
Mhm.
and yeah, may you all be at peace. So, as usual, always an honor, Dakota. I'll see you when I see you.
Okay.
All
Mwah.
right.
To all.
Bye now.